We're back. This is our Week 8 Google Doc instruction video to help you learn how to apply the content that we've been learning in the last couple weeks and actually complete it in a Google Doc. We know, of course, not everything can be done in a Google Doc, but what we're going to talk about today is how can we create and format and modify those tables in Google Docs that we just learned about last week in Week 7. And we're going to talk a little bit about Chapter 5, where we learned how to insert images and text boxes and shapes into Google Docs. And so that's what we're going to do in this short video. And when we're done, you'll have your practice assignment to turn in. So let's get started. And the very first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go to a blank document here in Google Docs. And we are going to start with tables. We know from last week that tables are made up of rows and columns, and in Word we learned how to use the ribbons. We learned about the design ribbon to make it look pretty. We learned about the layout ribbon, that helped us to not only add and delete rows and columns, but it also helped us do our formulas and all those sorts of things. What's different, however, as we talk about Google Docs is that once we insert tables, we really don't have new formatting tools, but we do have a few options. So let's take a look at how we insert a table. There's just one way. We're going to go to the Insert ribbon. We're going to come down to Table. And here, as we arrow over, you're going to notice just the one way to insert a table. This was the very first way that we talked about in Word, but it's the only way in Google Docs. So you decide how many rows and how many columns that you need in your table, and as soon as you highlight those and hit your Enter key, it will pop this table into your document. One thing to know about these tables is that you cannot do any formulas or functions. There is no computations in a table in Google Docs. In order to do that, of course, you would need to open up a new Sheets form, which is another app of Google's that's very much like Excel, but there are no computations in these tables. So what we can do is we can type in text. We can format things like titles by adding another rows and other columns. And where we're going to do that is actually two places. I can either right-click when I'm in a table and get my table formatting options, or I can go to Format, Table. But sometimes if I'm not in the table, when I go to Format, I don't have the table option available to me. But here we go. Format, Table. I can insert rows above or below. I can delete. I can delete the entire table. I can also merge and unmerge cells. And then I also have an option for Table Properties, which is where I can do shading for the cell background color. And again, it's only going to apply on the cell I'm at that particular moment. I can change the table alignment, and I can do the cell alignment. This is just vertical, top, middle, bottom. The alignment horizontally I would do just like I normally do with my regular alignment tools. Cell padding is kind of like those cell margins we learned about last week. And if I need to indent, whereas we could use the Control-Tab key in Word, there is no Control-Tab in a Google table, so we're going to use this indentation feature here. So that's how we can format. So for this particular table that I have, I'm going to insert a row above, and I'm going to show you how to merge and add a title. So all I do is I kind of pay attention to where my cursor is, and I'm either again going to right-click, or I'm going to go up to Format, Table, either way, and I'm going to insert a row above. I have a new row, and I'm going to merge those together just by selecting those rows, and again, either right-clicking, or I'm going to go to my Format ribbon, but I'm going to come down and find Merge Cells. Just like last week, that merges, and then I can add my title here. And if I wanted to do horizontal alignment, just like we said, we can use our regular tools. Or if I wanted to do vertical alignment, I would again go to my Table Properties. and do that. And how I get there again, don't forget Format, Table, Table, Table Properties. And this is where I can do vertical alignment if my cell was much wider. And again, my borders are here. If I wanted to add a nice thick border, I could apply that to my table. So that is how you work with tables in Google Docs. And in this week's assignment, you're going to just practice adding a table. You're going to practice just putting text in the table. You move around the same way with your arrows or your tab key or shift tab as you learned last week to go back. Okay, so that's a table. I'm going to insert just a horizontal line here so that below here we can now focus on our next task, which was learning how to insert images and text boxes and shapes. So one of the things that we already know how to do is insert images, right? Insert image, I can upload from the computer, I can copy and paste. But one thing to note, I can also upload things that I have saved in my drive, also in my Google Photos. I also can, if I'm on a device that has a camera, I can also link it right to my camera and take a picture and have it inserted right away. So those are some interesting things to know. So we're not going to spend time on pictures because you can put pictures in there. But what we are going to spend time is on shapes and text boxes, because we learned a lot about that in Chapter 5. And actually, before we do that, I think that we do want to show you one thing about images. So I'm going to insert an image from my computer really quickly. I'm going to go to my pictures. I'm going to just pull on a sample picture and open it. One thing I wanted to let you know is that unlike Word, where we have entire new ribbons that help us format these pictures, we have a few tools that we can deal with pictures in. One is a cropping tool that allows us to crop only square and then hit enter, and then I have a cropped picture. I can do that. I also have the ability to reset the image. If I had cropped it and I didn't like it, I could reset the image so that it went back. It's smaller, but the full image is there. The other thing that we have here is something called image options, and there's not a ton of them, but I can recolor it. I can change the transparency. Let's say I wanted to use this behind the text box and actually type over the top, or use it as a watermark. I can change it so it's kind of see-through. I can change the brightness, and I can change the contrast. Now obviously I've messed this up, so I can also reset this picture to something else. So those are the only options we really have for our images. Just like in Word, when I see these circles, that means I can adjust. I could turn the picture entirely around. That's the same case for anything I insert text boxes and shapes. But I did want to just have you deal with those few image options. We can crop, or we can set color and transparency. One thing I don't want you to forget about is always the idea of wrapping text. Really important in Word and in Google Docs that I deal with wrapping text. If I want text to go around this and be able to move it around my document very easily, I need to deal with that text wrapping. Okay? All right, enough of that. Let's now go back and talk about what I was going to talk about before, and that is shapes and text boxes. Because at first glance, when we go to insert, we're like, whoa, there are no shapes and there are no text boxes. But just so that you know, we have those, but they're in something called drawing. It's in the drawing tool. So you have to go to drawing, click on it, and then we have a drawing tool canvas that comes up. And as we look at it, we can see right here shapes, right here text boxes. Oh, and look, you also have images. Now, one of the weird things is that we actually create whatever we want on this palette, and when we close it, it puts it back into our Google Doc, but it's square. So if I need text, or if I want other things around these shapes or these shapes attached to images, I have to do it inside this drawing tool. So let's take a look at that. If I click on shapes, I'm going to recognize all of these shapes because I've seen them in Word. They're the same, and they work very much the same as well. I find the one I want, I click on it, and then I get this little plus and I click, hold, and drag the size that I want. See? We recognize that. We know anytime we have a shape with this yellow dot, that means I can move it around and point it to certain things. And we know that we can type in these shapes, just like we can in Word. What I'll do though is I think that's too small a text, so I can use my features up here and resize, and I can recolor, and I can make it bold, and I can center it. I can do all the things that I know how to do, but I'm just doing it inside this drawing tool. When I'm done with whatever shape it is, whatever I want to do, and I hit save and close, notice it throws it right inside of my document. But notice it's square. So this is kind of like a text box with the shape in it, and I can have it in my document. And I have to deal with text wrapping just like I would anything else. So those are shapes. Now let's look at text boxes, because this is a little bit different. We go back to our drawing tool, and let's say, hey, we want to add a text box. We click it, and there are no options. And unlike Word, where we had the pull-out quotes, and we had those lovely formatted sidebars and such, we don't have those here. We have a simple square text box that, again, we can type in, right? And just like the shapes, we can do background color, we can do border color, all of those things we do inside this drawing tool. Those colors are a little bit crazy, aren't they? So all the things you already know how to do, you do, but you do them right here within the drawing tool. So that's the text box. And because I didn't put a border around it and because I didn't shade it, I don't actually see the text box in my document, but it's there because when I click on it, I see the text box and the size of it. I can resize it in here, but notice how when I resize the text box, it resizes my text. So that is how you add a text box. That is how you add a picture if you want to have text boxes or shapes alongside it. This is also how you add any of your shapes. As you add your shapes, don't forget your formatting tools then, once they're added, come up here to the right. I can click this More button to get all the normal formatting tools I'm used to and change the background color or the fill color, the border color, etc. So it's pretty straightforward, and this week you're just going to practice doing those things. And actually the document that you'll be working with is something that looks like this, and it's in your Moodle site. It'll say click here, make a copy, and when you do that, this is what you'll see. Ask you to make a copy. Like last week we learned, we go to File, make our own copy, remember, save it in your drive, and then it asks you to go down, put your cursor on page 2 down here, and then complete these instructions. And I left them on this page so it's easier for you to see them at the same time as you're doing the assignment. So I apologize that they're on this document for you, but for me personally it's easier. And all it's going to ask you to do is add an image and format it, so you mess around a little bit with the cropping, that you look at the transparency, just do whatever you want to do. I don't care, there's no right or wrong as long as I see that you've done this. And then you're going to add a drawing. I don't care what drawing, what kind of text box and what kind of shape. It's just that you've added them and that you've typed on both of them and that you added borders and color and that you added a table, figured out how to add a title by adding another row. So I'm just having you practice. That's it. And change your alignment in those table properties. And I've given little hints, format table, table properties, format table, table properties. That's where you're going to find those features now. I'm not in a table, so I don't have my table properties, but if I was, it'd be there. All right, well, that is this week's assignment. Make sure you save it with me. If you are not in my class, make sure you're saving it with your instructor. And I'm just grateful for you guys to be in my class, and thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see your assignments. Have a good night.